My team lead reassigned my accounts in a 10-minute meeting, like he was moving chairs around a conference room. Just a calm voice, a polite smile, and a slide deck full of words like coverage, alignment, and efficiency. I sat there nodding, because in corporate life, you learn fast that the first person who shows emotion is the first person who loses. But here's the part that still makes my stomach tighten. Those weren't just accounts. Those were the clients I'd built from cold introductions into renewals. The ones who texted me when something broke at 9 p.m. The ones who trusted me enough to say, "If you ever leave, tell me where you go." And when he took them, I didn't fight him in that room. I just watched him do it. Because I didn't understand yet that he wasn't just taking my book of business. He was taking credit, commission, leverage, and he assumed the clients would follow the org chart like obedient little dots on a PowerPoint. They didn't. I'm a mid-level account manager at a mid-sized B2B services company, big enough to have culture decks and leadership principles, small enough that politics decides who gets promoted more than performance does. My job was relationship management, retention, expansion, upsells when it made sense. I wasn't a hunter. I was the person who kept the machine running once sales handed the client off. My comp was base, plus commission tied to renewals and expansions. Nothing crazy, but if you had a solid book, you could actually breathe. The unspoken rule was simple. If you owned the relationship, you owned the responsibility. And as long as you weren't tanking it, nobody touched your accounts without a real reason. My book wasn't flashy, but it was stable. Clean renewals, low churn, and a few clients who genuinely liked working with me. I didn't win them with charisma. I won them by doing the boring stuff consistently. Taking notes, following up, getting people answers, fixing the messes that other departments pretended weren't theirs. My team lead, Aaron, was the opposite of me in the way that plays well in conference rooms. Early 40s, perfect haircut, always said, "Let's take this offline," and somehow made everything sound like a strategic initiative, even when it was just common sense. He didn't yell. He didn't threaten. He didn't need to. He had that talent for making you feel like you were being unreasonable just by asking a normal question. When Aaron got promoted into management, I actually felt hopeful. He talked a lot about protecting the team, removing roadblocks, letting people do their best work. And for a few months, it looked real. Fewer pointless meetings, more clarity. He'd praise my numbers in group calls. He'd call me steady and reliable, which in our world was code for, "You make my dashboard look good." Then late Q2, we lost a big renewal on another pod, not mine, not even close. But leadership panicked anyway, because executives don't distinguish between a fire in someone else's kitchen and smoke in the hallway. Suddenly, everything was risk management. Suddenly, every client was at risk if it made someone higher up look proactive. That's when Aaron put a 1-1 on my calendar titled, "Coverage Plan, no agenda, no notes, just 15 minutes." I joined the call right on time. He was already there, camera on, lighting perfect, like he'd been waiting to deliver a weather report. Behind him was a clean office wall with one frame print, something motivational and expensive looking. He smiled the way people smile when they've already decided the outcome. "Hey man," he said, "how you doing?" "Good," I lied automatically. "Great. So, quick context." He shared his screen. A spreadsheet. Client names, ARR. Renewal dates. Colored columns. My stomach dropped when I saw it was basically my entire book highlighted. "We're doing some adjustments," he said, as if he was talking about seating at a wedding. "Leadership wants more redundancy. If someone gets sick, goes on vacation, whatever, clients shouldn't feel it. So we're aligning accounts by vertical and complexity." I stared at the list. 3 of my top 5 accounts had a new owner column filled in. Not a backup, not secondary. An owner. 2 of them were the ones I'd spent the most time saving. One had threatened to churn last year because implementation was a disaster, and they didn't trust our support team. I'd personally pulled in our ops director, Sat on weekly calls for 2 months and got them back to neutral. The other was an expansion client that started small and grew because I took the time to understand how they actually used our service. I kept my voice steady. So, what's the reason these are moving? Aaron didn't miss a beat. Not performance-based, he said quickly like he'd rehearsed it. You've done great work. This is just about scaling. We're giving you some different accounts that match your capacity. What different accounts? He scrolled down to the bottom. Smaller, messier, the kind that had been bounced around between reps. One had a renewal date in 6 weeks and a note that said, "Relationship strained." My mouth went dry. So I'm losing 3 renewals that are already warm, and I'm getting accounts that are already on fire. Aaron smiled, still calm. I wouldn't frame it like that. It's a growth opportunity. And to be clear, this isn't a demotion. It's just a redistribution. There was a moment where I could have exploded. Not screamed, just let my frustration show. I could have said what I was thinking. You're taking my safest revenue to protect yourself and handing me the riskiest accounts, so I absorb the blame when something goes wrong. But I didn't. Because Aaron had done this long enough to know that the first argument becomes the story, and the story becomes the performance review. So I asked the only question that mattered. How does this affect my commission? He paused like he was surprised I'd asked, like money was a vulgar topic in a company that literally existed to extract it. We'll work through that, he said. There are protections in place. I'll talk to finance. Protections like what? I asked, still calm. He tilted his head slightly. I don't have the details right now, but I want you to trust me. I wouldn't let you get screwed. That word, trust, hit me wrong. Not because I didn't want to trust him, because he was asking for it, right as he was taking something from me. I nodded slowly, the way you nod when you're trying to buy time inside your own head. Okay, when does this take effect? Immediately, he said. We're informing the clients this week. I'll handle the messaging. Less confusion that way. That was the second punch. If he handled the messaging, he controlled the narrative. He could tell them I was promoted, reassigned, busy, unavailable. Whatever made the transition smooth for him and invisible for leadership. I heard myself say, can I at least be on the intro calls? Aaron's smile tightened, just a fraction. Let's not muddy it. Clean handoff. You'll be focused on onboarding the new accounts. Got it, I said, because that's what you say when you realize the meeting wasn't a discussion. He wrapped up with a few lines about teamwork and resilience. Then he ended the call like he'd just done me a favor. I sat there staring at my blank laptop screen for a long time, longer than I want to admit. My hands were on the desk, and I could feel my pulse in my fingertips. I wasn't shaking. I wasn't panicking. I was calculating. Because the thing about accounts isn't just the revenue. It's the history, the context, the trust you've built in 100 small moments. And if someone takes that from you with a spreadsheet and a smile, you don't beat them by being louder. You beat them by being cleaner. So I opened a new folder on my computer, named it something boring, and started saving everything I could without breaking policy. Meeting invites, CRM change logs, emails, internal notes. I pulled the last 6 months of client feedback and renewal projections. I took screenshots of the spreadsheet Aaron had shared, including the timestamp in the corner. Then I did one more thing that felt small at the time. I checked my calendar for the week, and I saw 3 client touchpoints that Aaron had just added himself to, calls he'd never cared about before, on the exact accounts he'd reassigned to himself. That's when I finally understood what was happening, and I stopped assuming fairness was part of the process. The first client called me 2 days later, not an email, not a calendar invite routed through Aaron, a direct call to my cell, late afternoon, right as I was closing notes on one of the new accounts I'd been handed, the kind that already felt like it was halfway out the door. I stared at the name on the screen for a second before answering. Hey, I said carefully. Everything okay? There was a pause. Not technical. Human. Yeah, kind of, she said. I just got an email saying Aaron is my new point of contact. Did something happen? That question, did something happen, carried more weight than it should have. It wasn't accusatory. It was confused, and that mattered. I kept my voice neutral. No, nothing bad. Just an internal coverage change. Another pause, longer this time. So, you're not on our account anymore. Not officially, I said, but I'm still around internally if things come up. She exhaled, the sound sharp and unfiltered. That's frustrating. We finally got things stable. I didn't agree. I didn't validate. I didn't poison the well. I just listened. She filled the silence for me. No offense, but Aaron doesn't know our setup. He wasn't in those escalation calls last year. We spent months getting alignment. I know, I said quietly. I remember. Well, she said, lowering her voice like someone might be listening, I hope he's up to speed. After we hung up, I didn't celebrate. I didn't feel vindicated. I felt irritated in a very specific way. The kind that comes when someone creates extra work for everyone else and calls it leadership. By the end of the week, it happened again. Different client, same confusion, same polite attempt to understand why the person who knew their business had vanished without warning. Aaron had told me he'd handle the messaging, and technically he had. He'd sent clean corporate emails about strategic alignment and expanded support. What he hadn't done was prepare for the part where clients asked follow-up questions, because clients always ask follow-up questions. I stayed disciplined. I replied only when contacted. I didn't loop myself into threads. I didn't contradict anything Aaron said. Every response was professional, short and documented. Still, the pattern was obvious. The clients weren't mad. They were unsettled. And unsettled clients don't renew easily. Meanwhile, the accounts I'd been given were exactly what they'd looked like on the spreadsheet. Fragile, under-resourced, and already resentful. One opened our first call by saying, "So you're the third rep this year. How long before you disappear too?" I started working 12-hour days without realizing it, not to prove a point, just to keep things from breaking. And every night before shutting my laptop, I wrote down what I'd seen that day. Not feelings, facts, dates, call outcomes, who said what. When ownership fields changed in the CRM, when renewal probabilities mysteriously jumped after Aaron took over my old accounts, despite no actual activity logged, I also noticed something else. Aaron was suddenly everywhere. He'd joined calls he used to skip, sent recap emails 5 minutes after meetings ended, summarizing decisions he hadn't actually driven. He'd started using phrases I recognized, language I'd used with those clients for years. It was subtle, not plagiarism, appropriation. I brought it up once, carefully, in a 1.1. I'm getting outreach from a few of the reassigned clients, I said. They're confused. Might help if we do joint transitions. Aaron leaned back in his chair, fingers steepled. I need you to redirect them to me. I am, I said, but they're asking why the change happened. That's not for you to explain, he replied. We don't want mixed messages. I nodded. Understood. Just want to make sure renewals aren't at risk. That's when his tone shifted, still calm, colder. I'm a little concerned you're being territorial, he said. That can be dangerous in a team environment. There it was, the quiet threat. Not explicit enough to report, clear enough to remember. I left that call with a tight jaw and a clearer picture. This wasn't about coverage. It was about optics. Aaron wanted my numbers under his name before year-end, and if something blew up, I'd be holding the mess. That night, I pulled my comp plan and read it like a contract, instead of a guideline. The language around ownership was vague. The language around origination wasn't. I checked the CRM audit logs, something most people never bother with. They told a story. Ownership changes, time-stamped, authorized, clean. But the notes? The notes had been edited. Meeting outcomes reworded. Risks softened. Not falsified, just reshaped enough to make dashboards look healthier than reality. I didn't accuse anyone. I didn't confront HR. I wasn't angry enough to be reckless. I was irritated enough to get precise. So I kept working. I stabilized what I could. I let Aaron run his victory lap. And I quietly stopped thinking of the company as a place where effort was rewarded. Because once you see how easily credit can be reassigned, you start asking a different question. Not, how do I fix this? But, what happens if I stop protecting them? I realized I was done trying to manage the situation the day one of my former clients forwarded me an email by accident. It wasn't dramatic. No insults, no threats. Just a short message Aaron had sent after a quarterly review call. Great conversation today. I think we're finally past the rough patch from earlier this year. Earlier this year, that rough patch had been 3 months of escalations, missed SLAs, and executive-level frustration that I'd personally absorbed so the account wouldn't walk. Aaron hadn't been on a single one of those calls, but now, on paper, the narrative had changed. The mess had been reframed as something abstract and resolved, something he'd inherited and heroically stabilized. I stared at the forwarded email longer than I should have. Then I saved it. I didn't confront him. I didn't forward it to leadership. I didn't even reply to the client beyond thanking them and redirecting them like I was supposed to. But something in me shifted. Not anger, detachment. Up until that point, a part of me still believed this could be corrected internally. That if I kept things professional, if I documented carefully, someone higher up would notice the inconsistency. That logic would win. That belief died quietly that afternoon, because what Aaron was doing wasn't sloppy. It was controlled. He wasn't stealing in a way that triggered alarms. He was smoothing, rewriting, positioning himself as the stabilizer of accounts that had already been stabilized. And leadership loved stabilizers. A week later, the third reassigned client reached out. This one didn't call. They scheduled a meeting. The invite included Aaron. It also included a director from their side, someone who never joined unless something was wrong. I joined the call, muted, camera off, as instructed. Aaron did most of the talking. He walked through slides I recognized, metrics I'd built, phrasing I'd used, timelines I knew by heart. Then the director interrupted him. "Can I ask a blunt question?" she said. "Of course," Aaron replied smoothly. "Why was he removed from the account?" There it was. No confusion, no politeness, just the question. Aaron hesitated for half a second. Not enough for most people to notice. Long enough for me to. "It was an internal alignment decision," he said. "As we scale, we want to make sure—" She cut him off. "That's not what I'm asking. We don't care about your internal structure. We care about continuity. He knows our systems. He knows our history. Removing him created friction." The silence that followed was heavy. Aaron recovered quickly. "I understand the concern. We're committed to ensuring—" She shook her head. "We already escalated internally on our side. If this becomes an issue at renewal, this will be part of the conversation." That was the moment. Not loud, not explosive, but definitive. Because after that call ended, Aaron didn't ask how it went. He messaged me privately. "Next time, let me handle those questions." I stared at the message, my cursor blinking in the reply box. I typed nothing. Instead, I opened my notes and added one more entry. The next week, I requested a meeting with HR. Not to complain, to ask a procedural question. How are commission disputes reviewed if account ownership changes mid-cycle? The HR rep gave me a careful answer, process-oriented, non-committal. But she confirmed something important. Disputes were only reviewed if raised, and documentation mattered. So I raised it, calmly, formally, with timestamps, CRM logs, and the original reassignment spreadsheet. No accusations, just facts. Leadership's response came 2 days later. They thanked me for the transparency, then told me the reassignment had been approved, that commissions would be evaluated holistically. that I should focus on execution. It wasn't a no. It was worse. It was a signal that they weren't going to intervene unless something broke badly enough to force them. That night, I sat at my kitchen table with my laptop open and my phone face down. I wasn't panicking. I wasn't plotting revenge. I was reviewing options. I updated my resume for the first time in 3 years. Not dramatically, just honest adjustments, metrics, retention rates, expansion percentages. I reached out to 2 former colleagues who'd left the company quietly and landed well. I didn't ask for referrals. I asked questions. How did you know it was time? Both answers were different. Both meant the same thing. Then something happened that removed any remaining doubt. One of the accounts Aaron had taken missed a renewal milestone, not because of the client, because an internal deliverable slipped, a resource he'd reassigned to another priority without understanding the dependency. The client escalated, hard, and suddenly I was back on the calendar, pulled into a war room call as a subject matter resource. Aaron framed it as collaboration, but when the client asked direct questions he couldn't answer, he deferred to me. On the call, in front of leadership, I answered, cleanly, professionally. I fixed the issue in 48 hours. And when the follow-up email went out, thanking the team for stepping up, Aaron replied all within minutes. Great save, everyone. Not my name. Not once. That was the break. Not because my ego was bruised, because I saw the future clearly. I would continue to clean up problems. He would continue to own the narrative. Leadership would continue to reward the appearance of control. And when something finally failed badly enough, the blame would land exactly where the paper trail pointed. On me. So I made a decision that felt strangely calm. I stopped trying to survive the system and started preparing to leave it, because they thought I was still playing defense. They had no idea I was already planning my exit. The offer came faster than I expected. Not because I was desperate, because I was careful. I took calls during lunch breaks, kept my LinkedIn quiet, spoke in specifics without naming names. When recruiters asked why I was leaving, I didn't say politics. I said my scope changed in a way that no longer matches how I deliver value. That sentence landed better than the truth. 2 weeks in, a competitor made it clear they wanted me. Same industry, slightly larger, cleaner org structure, base pay higher, commission plans simpler, and most importantly, no non-compete, only a standard non-solicit. I read that clause 3 times. It said I couldn't initiate contact with former clients for a defined period. It said nothing about responding if they reached out to me on their own. It said nothing about general industry conversations, conferences, or referrals. I had an attorney look at it anyway, not a friend, someone who did this for a living. He confirmed what I already suspected. If they come to you and you don't prompt it, you're clean. Document everything. So I did. I gave notice the following Monday. 2 weeks. Professional. No speeches. Aaron's reaction was almost disappointing. He smiled, said he was happy for me, asked where I was going. I told him the industry, not the company. He nodded like he already knew. Leadership scheduled an exit interview. HR asked the usual questions. I stayed factual. No accusations, no drama. My last day came and went quietly. And then the silence started. For about a week, nothing happened. No emails, no messages. Just the strange calm that follows a storm you can't see yet. Then my phone rang. It was the same client who'd called me first after the reassignment. I know this might be awkward, she said, but can I ask where you landed? I paused. Not theatrically, legally. I can't solicit, I said carefully, but I can tell you where I am. She thanked me. Hung up. 2 days later, another message. Different client. We're not happy with the transition. Do you have time for a quick conversation, off the record? I scheduled it, took notes, said nothing that crossed a line. By the end of the month, 3 clients had initiated formal conversations with my new company. Not because I pitched them, because their renewals were approaching, and the trust they'd lost hadn't magically come back. That's when things started to unravel on the other side. Aaron's numbers dipped first. Nothing catastrophic. Just enough to raise eyebrows. Then a renewal slipped. Then another expansion stalled. Leadership asked questions. Aaron blamed timing, market conditions, residual friction from past issues. Someone in finance noticed something else. The commission forecasts didn't match realized revenue. Ownership dates were off. Notes looked curated. An internal audit followed. Quiet. Limited scope. Then it expanded. I heard about it secondhand through someone I used to sit next to. They weren't looking for one mistake. They were looking for a pattern, and they found one. CRM edits. Reassigned ownership right before reporting cutoffs. Inflated health scores with no activity logged. A habit of stepping in right before success was documented. The thing about systems is that they don't forget. They just wait. By the time Aaron realized what was happening, it was too late to manage the narrative. Leadership didn't confront him loudly. They didn't need to. They removed him from account ownership first, then from people management, then quietly from the company. No announcement, no goodbye email, just a calendar that went blank. I didn't feel victorious when I found out. I felt done, because by then I was busy, not scrambling, working. My new role was calmer, cleaner. Clients respected boundaries. Leadership cared less about optics and more about outcomes. One afternoon, I pulled up my pipeline and realized something strange. None of it felt heavy. I wasn't watching my back. I wasn't documenting for protection. I wasn't translating chaos into clarity for someone else's benefit. I was just doing my job. And somewhere in the middle of an ordinary workday, it hit me. They thought they took my accounts. What they actually did was teach me when to leave. And they paid the price for thinking relationships belonged to spreadsheets. The strange thing about the ending is that it didn't feel like an ending at all. There was no dramatic call. No moment where someone apologized. No email admitting mistakes. Life just stabilized. A few months into the new role, I stopped checking my old company's LinkedIn page. Not out of discipline, out of disinterest. I was busy in a way that felt different, focused, useful. My calendar was full, but not crowded. Meetings had agendas. Decisions stuck. The clients who'd followed didn't talk about the past much. When they did, it was always the same sentence, phrased a dozen different ways. We just wanted someone who actually knew us. That was it. No revenge, no speeches, just alignment restored. The last update I ever got about Aaron came from HR paperwork that crossed my desk by accident. A system glitch. His name attached to an old approval chain, flagged as inactive. Terminated, not reassigned. Not seeking new opportunities. Gone. I closed the tab and didn't think about him again that day. What surprised me most was how my body reacted over time. The tightness in my shoulders faded. I stopped waking up at 3 a.m. replaying conversations. I didn't rehearse explanations in the shower anymore. There was no one to perform for. One afternoon, a junior rep on my new team asked me for advice. "Is it better to be visible?" he said. "Or reliable?" I thought about it longer than he expected. "Be reliable," I said. "Visibility follows when the right people are watching. And if it doesn't, you're probably in the wrong room." He nodded, wrote it down, and moved on. I sat there for a moment after the call ended, realizing I'd answered honestly without protecting myself. That was the real reward. Not watching someone else fall, not being proven right, but the absence of noise. I didn't win by outplaying anyone. I didn't expose secrets. I didn't force accountability. I just stopped lending my stability to a system that used it without respect. And here's the part I don't say out loud very often. If Aaron had just asked, if he'd been honest about pressure, about targets, about needing help, I probably would have shared the load. I was built for that kind of work. But once someone decides you're a resource instead of a person, the relationship is already over. It just takes time for reality to catch up. In the end, the clients didn't follow me because I was special. They followed consistency. The company didn't lose because of one bad manager. They lost because they taught their best people that loyalty was optional. And I didn't walk away bitter. I walked away lighter, which, it turns out, is the most satisfying ending there is.